and honoring the life of Ntate Lekota. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Dumelang bagolo. Good morning. Khotso. Re utlwile botlhoko e le ruri empaneng matsatsi a mabedi a fetileng we got the start of what is today a therapeutic funeral to help us to ease the pain and start to learn to live with the man no longer in his physical being. I wish to request welcome remarks from the Premier of our beloved province, Mayor Makwin Mitsou. Ke ne ke kopa temana e le nngwe fela re a go boka morena motho lo na le lentswe le le molodi a
Re a boka morena re tserita bena wena ha re mendileng re sapina hamo hamonati kapamano
Seiso Mohai le Ntate Sekhupi Malebo ka le pele ke se hlompho to the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Ntate Paul Mashatile, ke se hlompho to former President Sarona Ntate Motlanthe, Ntate Thabo Mbeki le ba le tsamayang le bona, the Lekota family, members of the National Assembly and NCOP, members of the legislature from different provinces, Isehlongpo to premiers from Northern Cape, and also you, Zamani, the leadership of the African National Congress, the leadership of COPE, the organization to which Mr. Lekota belonged to, the leadership of government across all spheres, leaders of different political parties, esteemed guests, and fellow South Africans. The moments in the life of a nation when words struggle to carry the weight of memory. Unfortunately, today is such a moment. Today we gather not only to mourn, but to reflect on the life of a man whose journey was inseparable from the long and painful march of our people towards freedom. Mosiuoa Lekota belonged to that generation of South Africans who confronted injustice not as an abstract idea, but as a daily lived reality. It was a world that the great protest song Strange Fruit, made famous by singer Billie Holiday, tried to capture with haunting simplicity. In its opening line, the song magnifies the chilling words, and I quote, "Southern trees bear a strange fruit," close quote. These words spoke of a world disfigured by racism and cruelty, a world in which the dignity of the black person was denied and human life was made to hang vicariously at the mercy of prejudice. It was against such a world that Comrade Terra rebelled. Comrade Terra was among those young South Africans who, when confronted by the injustice and brutality of apartheid, resolved that their lives would not be lived in quiet submission. In the alternative, they chose a long and difficult road of struggle. As a young activist, Comrade Terra was shaped by the South African Student Organization and the commanding intellectual awakening inspired by the radical black consciousness movement. The great martyr of that movement, Steve Biko, would contend that, and I quote, "The great powers of the world may have done wonders in giving the world an industrial and military look, but the great gift still has to come from Africa, giving the world a more humane face." For many young South Africans of that era, including Comrade Terra Lekota, these were not just philosophical words, but a summons to reclaim the dignity of the oppressed masses of our people and to achieve a truly egalitarian and democratic society. His political journey carried him into the ranks of the United Democratic Front, a revolutionary mass democratic movement which united communities, churches, workers, student and civic organizations into a powerful force for liberation. Like many of his generation, he paid dearly for his commitment to freedom. At the young age of 25, he was imprisoned on Robben Island, where he remained from 1974 until 1983. The Robben Island prison became a diabolical site intended to break the political will of our people. Yet, it achieved the opposite. It strengthened the resolve of those who would later lead our nation. Soon after his release, he again found himself in the dock during the Delmas treason trial, easily one of the longest political trials in our country's history. These experiences shaped the character of the man we remember and celebrate today. When the democratic breakthrough came in 1994, the people of South Africa turned to those who had fought for freedom to help build a nation they had helped liberate. Tate Lekota answered that call. He was entrusted with the responsibility of serving as the premier of our province. Those were years of enormous transition. The old order had collapsed, but the institutions of the new democracy were still fragile. Provinces had to be built almost from scratch. The administration had to be transformed, and a society divided by history had to begin the difficult work of healing. In that moment of transition, the responsibility of leadership was immense. As Premier, Tate Lekota understood that public office carried with it a moral obligation to the people. He believed deeply in the principles of fairness, justice, and good governance. He insisted that the new democratic state must be guided not by patronage, but by the rule of law and accountability. Those who worked with Natal Lekota will attest to that he carried his understanding of leadership into the office of government. He believed that democracy would only endure if those entrusted with power exercise it with humility and integrity. Of course, principles have a curious way of complicating political life. For Natal Lekota, his insistence on good governance sometimes placed him at odds with those who believe politics should be conducted differently. This occasionally produced tensions with younger and exuberant political figures who would later travel their own path in the corridors of power. One might say without hesitation that Natal Lekota's stubborn attachment to principle made him somewhat incompatible with a political culture that later came to dominate parts of our public life. History, after all, sometimes plays in sharp contrast those who seek to build institutions and those who seek to capture them. Program Director, I am reminded of a scripture from the book of Micah, 6 verse 8, which read, and I quote, "Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God." Comrade Tara's life was a living embodiment of the scripture from the prophet Micah, a call to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. His courage reminds us today more than ever that true leadership cannot be separated from conscience. A leader without conscience is merely a manager of power. A leader with conscience like Natal Lekota becomes a moral compass to the nation. Yet, throughout these trials, Comrade Tara remained guided by principled conviction that public office must be used to empower the people, not to enrich the powerful. To borrow from Kwame Nkrumah, and I quote, "The independence of a nation is meaningless unless it improves the lives of the people," and close quote. This belief that freedom must translate into justice, dignity, and opportunity is precisely what animated the generation to which Comrade Tara belonged. His journey later took him to the National Council of Provinces, where he continued to serve for democracy. Thereafter, he was redeployed to serve as Minister of Defense under President Thabo Mbeki, where he helped guide the transformation of our defense force and marshal it into alignment with our constitutional imperatives. Yet, through all these roles, he remained a true servant of the people at heart. Comrade Tara belonged to a generation of public servants who believed, as he did, that the destiny of a nation is shaped by the ethical choices of those entrusted with power. He believed that leaders must be guided by principle, that public power must be exercised with humility, and that the interests of the people must always stand above personal ambition and interest. History will record that he was not a passive observer. He was not a passive observer in the making of the democratic South African reality. He was an active participant who raised his hand and said, "Count me among those who will serve." The best tribute we can pay to Comrade Tara is not merely to speak kindly of him today, but to recommit ourselves to the values that guided his life. These values are service, integrity, courage, and unwavering dedication to the people. On behalf of the Free State Provincial Government, we welcome you, Honorable Deputy President, former President. We welcome all the distinguished delegation of leaders, past and present, and indeed every person gathered here to pay their last respect to this freedom fighter. Re amoela setšhaba kaofela se tlileng kwano, re re dintja re di fasolotse, a re mo tsamaiseng ka kgotso. Thank you.
Ke a leboga mme wa rona mopremiere motlotlegi wa province ya rona ya Free State. Ke etsa boipiletšo gore mo dibuing tsa rona tsotlhe mo programeng go šupiwa nako o le fiwa gore le ka bua ka yona, mme morago ha nako yo re bona e gobala ke tla ema ka mabedi. Ons verwys na ons program dat al die eerlike mense wat hier is saam met ons in die program daar die lyse het name en voor die name is daar tyd geskrywe hoe lang u kan ons u spreek gee. Kya lopa that those who are going to pay tributes on the program, there's an indication of the amount of time that has been allocated. Humbly, let's work together with that. We are under pressure not only of arriving at the graveyard in time, but also for some other logistics related to traveling of people to come here. Family, intumile gore ki biletse mo go Dr. Mokoena Potol to do the obituary. Jaka re itse so se wontleg ha re ira obituary ra ema go supa tlotlo ya bophelo bo ba mogaka. As usual, when obituary is read, we all rise to pay our last respect.
Motsamaisi wa mosebetsi lebitso ha se Mokoena ke Mokena Photolo. Good morning, distinguished guests, members of Lekota family, leaders of government, friends and fellow South Africans. Today we remember and honor the life of Mr. Mosiuoa Lekota. During his early life, Mr. Mosiuoa Lekota was born on the 13th of August 1948 in Senegal, Free State, formerly known as Orange Free State. He was the eldest of 9 children, born into the working class family. He began his schooling at Emma Farms School in Senegal before moving to Kroonstad, where he completed his primary education. He obtained his junior certificate at Mariazell High School before matriculating at St. Francis College, Maria Hill outside Durban. In his youth, he was an accomplished footballer with formidable skill and determination on the field, and the nickname Terror, and the name that will later synonymous with his fearless political activism. During his early political activism, Comrade Lekota's political consciousness developed while he was a student at University of the North, now the University of Limpopo, in early 1970s. He became involved in student politics and joined South African student organization, SASO. When SASO organizer Mr. Onkgopotse Tiro was forced into exile in 1973, Mr. Lekota stepped into a role. In 1974, he and 8 other SASO and Black People Convention leaders were arrested after organizing Viva Frelimo rallies to celebrate Mozambique independence. They were charged under the Terrorism Act and sentenced to imprisonment on Robben Island, where Comrade Lekota spent 6 years as a political prisoner. Words from the prison. From the prison, he wrote to his daughter, "Above them all, my dear, I'm in prison for the sake of peace, for our country and the world. I'm in a prison so that our generation may live to yours, and later generation and country and the world that has the greatest potential for progress. During his mass democratic struggle, after his release in 1982, Mr. Lekota immersed himself in the growing mass democratic movement. In 1983, he became one of the most founding members of United Democratic Front, UDF, and was elected National Publicity Secretary at its launch. In 1985, he was arrested with other UDF leaders in what became known as Delma's treason trial. In 1988, Comrade Lekota and fellow activist Mr. Popo Molefe, Mr. Mos Chikani, and Mr. Tom Mantata were convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The convictions were later overturned on appeal, and the accused were released on 15th of December 1989, after spending 4 years and 6 months in detention. During his leadership in South Africa, following the unveiling of African National Congress in 1990, Mr. Lekota played an important role in rebuilding democratic political structures. In 1981, he was elected to the ANC National Executive Committee and later served on its National Working Committee. Over the next decade, he held several important public offices: Premier of Free State from 1994 to 1996, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces from 1997 to 1999, Minister of Defense from 1999 to 2008, and National Chairperson of ANC from 1997 to 2007. Formation of the Congress of the People in October 2008. Former minister wrote what became widely known as divorce letter to the ANC, expressing concern that organization was departing from the values of Freedom Charter. He subsequently resigned as the Minister of Defense and helped convene a people convention that led to the formation of the Congress of People, COPE, launched in Bloemfontein in December 2008. He served for many years as a president of COPE and remained as active participant in South African's democratic discourse. During the parliamentary leadership, as president of COPE and a member of parliament, the former minister remained a respected voice in national debates about governance, accountability, and the future of South African democracy. He argued strongly for constitutional democracy, responsible governance, and the rule of law. Colleagues across the political spectrum respected him for his fearless contribution during parliamentary debates, as his unwavering commitment to democratic accountability. A nation salute a patriot. Mr. Mosiuoa Lekota stood like a baobab in the landscape of South African history for more than half of a century. His life journey paralleled the defining chapters of the nation's story, from the struggle against apartheid to the imprisonment on Robben Island to the building of our country's constitutional democracy. The passing of Mosiuoa Patrick Lekota evokes a profound sense of loss for his family, comrades, colleagues, and the nation he served with unwavering dedication for more than 5 decades. South Africa mourns the passing of extraordinary patriot, a courageous freedom fighter, political prisoner, statesman, parliamentarian, devoted father and grandfather, and a leader whose life became inseparable for the country-long journey towards freedom, justice, and democracy. In terms of family life, beyond politics, Mr. Lekota was a devoted family man. He was preceded in death by his daughter and 3 siblings. He survived by his wife, Mrs. Gladys Lekota, 6 children, 5 grandchildren, 5 siblings, and extended family, who cherished his wisdom, humor, and guidance. Robala ka khotso tshele ha na ithoka unari ke musia motobatsi motho wa mantha tshebe di ome la mkhoba tlung di omela ka ntle mabaleng moya o hlakai ba ke ntse mafika le majwe ke motho wa botshela le lituka ka tshela ke tshella mang ke tshella le bashwa le nkwanyane ke motho wa ho bua a re ke kitikemile o tletse fela thulo ke khane ya pere e tshweu ke tloa manga umpeng le tseo sengangata ke a tsamaya ke ha morena mopedi botshabelo ke a kena thabantsho ba golong ha morena mo hoka ke be ke kena ha ya Lesotho ke kopana le morena Letsie ha ke fika ha morena Letsie ke a haya Tsieng ke a haya Basieng ke lo kopana le bana ba heso ke lo kopana le magwesana ke lo kopana le bana ba heso Bolati le Bobuti ke lo kopana le mme Moswadi ke kopane le ntate wa ka ntate Bapiloko ke kopane le basia ba baholo bo le bajwa le nkwanyane ya kgaola yaya.
Re a leboha re ka nka ditulo tsa rona re kopa le qetelle ka ona hape modietsane o monate o ka nnete enwa ke mong wa bahale naheng ena ya rona ya Afrika Borwa jwale re tla timaneng ena hore there are different generations of leaders here. There are many comrades who shed trenches with terror directly, who crisscross the country, who work particularly to entrench the pillar of mass mobilization in our country to ensure all sectors of our communities were mobilized and machinery oiled to ensure that we dismantle the system of apartheid in South Africa. I am going to ask Comrades Dr. Diliza Mji, Comrade Trevor Manuel, and Comrade Popo Molefe. They will come and take their seats here so that one after the other, these comrades who particularly inspired us within the ranks of the youth movement. So I'll ask Dr. Diliza, who is not a stranger in Bloemfontein, because the father was a pastor, he also stayed in Bloemfontein. So Bloemfontein has always enjoyed a very central position in the country of South Africa. Many leaders have passed or find themselves crossing across the Bloemfontein area. Dr. Mji, you're welcome.
Thank you, Program Director. Deputy President Paul Mashatile, former presidents, Honorable Premier, interim leadership of COPE, dignitaries and esteemed fellow mourners. I ought to begin by thanking the family for asking me to pay the tribute to our beloved comrade Terra Lekota. This is based, I am sure,
on the fact that Comrade Terra cut his teeth in politics in Durban, where we spent time together. And I'm going to confine my talk about Comrade Terra to those early days when we started to join the struggle. Of course, you will recall, ladies and gentlemen, that the 1960s were a difficult time politically. The first decade of repression coincided with the banning of the liberation movement, and we, as young people, as student leaders in the South African Student Organization, picked up the baton from the banned movements. I first met Comrade Mosiuoa Lekota in 1972, 54 years ago, at the St. Peter's Seminary in Hammanskraal, where SASO had its third General Students' Council. I have no doubt that the controversy that erupted around the president's speech at that conference, wherein, amongst other things, he suggested that we begin to engage with people who differ with us politically, such as even the security police. We were so incensed by that statement. And Comrade Terra and us, Jeff Bagwa and others, we really, I think, in retrospect, were hardened against collaborators from that moment onwards. He was asked to leave and he was dismissed from the organization. Come the 1970s, this now was a decade of revival with the advent of Black consciousness. I met Comrade Terra again after the June conference at the December conference in Edendale Ecumenical Center, where we were reviewing the resolutions of conference. I cannot forget how we were so inspired by slogans like, "I am Black and I'm proud." Black is beautiful. Black man, you are on your own. After this conference, we then proceeded to live together in Claremont because he was expelled from Teflop, or he walked out rather, and became employed by the South African Student Organization, which was based in Beatty Street in Durban. We stayed in Claremont together, and I recall the day when he, on returning from Robben Island after his first stint, we tried to penetrate the trade union movement in Durban. We got him to work with us in the General Workers Union, which was based at the Point. We had no sooner got him in there as a trade union organizer than the leadership of the union, which was white and workerist in its orientation, organized that we get him, he be expelled from the union because he was a petty bourgeoisie, that's what they said, who wanted to hijack the workers' struggle. The rest followed. From there, he joined the UDF and then became a very prominent leader in the UDF, as we have heard. In 1989, we were both appointed co-conveners of the ANC in Southern Natal. Comrade Terra and I co-opted a number of other members to the committee, such as Alec Ewan, Spoon Debele, Comrade Achi Gumede, and within a 9-month period, we had established 100 branches in the Southern Natal region. It really baffles me even today how, when the first conference of the Southern Natal region was held, he was not promoted to become the first elected chairman of the province. As we know, he left in 1990 for the Free State and became the premier of the province. Those were the difficult days, ladies and gentlemen, where Comrade Terra showed his commitment, his loyalty to the struggle, his unwavering determination to free our people, his energetic demeanor, and a good communication skills. I am honored to have been present at his burial today and to pay a tribute to his lifelong struggle, life of struggle. And I'd like to conclude by thanking the family, but also to pay tribute to Cynthia Shange Lekota, who throughout the difficult years stood by his partner and spouse and bore him a number of children and did not forsake him for the reason that he was always out of the family, in prison, on Robben Island, etc. I think that has to be emulated and praised for what it is. It was a great, great contribution, Comrade Cynthia, that you have made, and I'd like to register our appreciation for you. Long live the spirit of Comrade Terra. Long live the struggle for complete freedom. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you. Kabelo ya kae yentle kale tati lena ikhete sihantle kinkile mo rena oh morena ya musa kiuneha bilu lintela kilegina Jesus
Amen.
Jesus
Amen.
Jesus
Amen. Amen.
Yes.
Ke a leboga moopedi wa rona. Keletso ya rona ne le gore fetise bontate ba bararo ba ka go latelana, mme moraga mo e tla be le gone re biletsang mo difeleng. Ke a leboga ntate Manuel.
Thank you, Program Director Comrade Malebu. Dumelang. Good morning to all. Let me greet Cynthia and the family, Kotani sitting next to you, the rest of the family, Deputy President Paul Mashatile, former President Mbeki, and Mutlante. Comrades and friends, thank you very much. Like Dr. Mji before me, I want to express sincere appreciation to the family for the invitation to be here with you today. We gathered to take leave of the giant-hearted Mosiuoa Lekota. He was a giant heart in every respect, and when a giant heart leaves, it offers us an opportunity to reflect on their life, but also to peer into our collective hearts as a nation. One of the features of this funeral today is that the colors of so many political organizations are represented here, because in many respects, Mosiuoa Lekota was bigger than any political organization. There are people here from the BC movement that he was part of before the ANC, from COPE, from the PAC, from every conceivable political organization, because that was in the nature of his being. There were some things he didn't give up on. He was a buccaneer for life, but in political choice, he was able to move on. In fact, I know that he died a very happy man after the 3-0 drubbing of some team the weekend before his passing. But that was Terra Lekota. That was him alive to every aspect of being Lekota. Part of what we understand about ourselves as a people is that South Africans have summoned up the courage to forgive those who perpetrated apartheid against us. But sometimes small political differences appear unresolvable, and I think Terra's life and experience was largely in contrast to that. The reality, of course, about everything he did was the force of his personality was bigger than any constraints it presented. He was but, as the Premier said, 24 when the Sasso trial started. He was released in 1982. And no sooner was he released, and I just want to correct something. He didn't join the UDF. He was part of the formation of the UDF from 1983. He was a builder, he was a visionary, he was determined in every possible way. And so, with the formalities of the UDF, you didn't properly need an election. Comrade Popo there was the General Secretary, and Terra Lekota was the public face of the UDF. He took struggle into small towns in a way that previously had been quite unfashionable. But it's also important to remind ourselves that this life, he came out of prison in 1982 and was virtually immediately ready to take on the next challenge to build the UDF. No gap between. And we sometimes treat this in a very macho way. We say, well, it's like the rites of passage. It's just like going to initiation school, going to Robben Island, going to detention. The truth is something very different. You know, he wrote in that wonderful collection called Letters to My Daughter, every chapter starts with the words, my dearest Chabi, and every chapter ends with the words, your loving dad. But he writes in the introduction, during these years I realized how multifaceted the struggle is. We were not only subjected to hard labor, but also cut off from our families to such an extent that we became strangers to each other. Located on an island far away from our families, we had visits that were short, few, and far between. Under those trying conditions, several families collapsed. We were fighting the struggle on a front we'd not previously anticipated. There were days when one preferred solitude, and I was no exception. On such days, I preferred to stay with my thoughts and feelings, but I always used to invite Chabi from the distant northern Natal country village of Mbutu, where she was raised by a grandmother, my mother-in-law. There's a depth of feeling that we sometimes gloss over in this need to be heroes. And Terra was brave and bold enough to bring that through in the letters to Mosiuoa, who, as we heard earlier, predeceased him by all of 3 decades. That painful reminder from Comrade Terra is that we mustn't be glib about who we are and where we come from. It takes a lot to advance struggle, but we must also remember that leaders are human beings and suffer from all the foibles and feebles that everybody else does. As publicity secretary of the UDF, he was indefatigable. He would get into a car and drive and stop in small towns and talk to people. He wasn't for the big cities and the rallies. He was happiest when he was amongst the people. And that was such a great hallmark. And if you look at the history of the UDF from 1983 August until July 85, when the first state of emergency was declared after the Craddock funeral, it was 23 months, but 23 intense months of building struggle, of taking it broadly. And you can't look at that period in the history of this country without understanding the strength, the determination, and the adrenaline of Terra Lekota. He seemed to be driven by that adrenaline and big buckets of a fried chicken whose name I can't remember. But he went around like that across the length and breadth of the country. And we were very concerned. I'm sure Comrade Popo, if he had time, would tell you about how we battled to slow Terra down. In this short period that he was out and publicity secretary of the UDF, he rolled 3 cars. And he rolled those cars, and there were periods of detention in between. He was going through cars at the rate of 1 every 9 months. But that was his determination, his energy, and he rushed from place to place and would get there and spend time with people and slowly listening to them and convincing them about struggle. And during this period, we laughed much. One of the features of Terra Lekota, and you can see it in all the pictures, he laughed. He laughed loudly, he laughed with gusto, and he was a great raconteur who could repeat stories. There's a great gift that many of the people on Robben Island have, and that is to tell stories. And every time they tell the story again and again, you laugh anew. There's more energy in the story, and that was Terra Lekota. But apart from the laughter, we were able to sit down and plot and plan and take responsibility for what we would do to bring down the apartheid regime. And he always reached out to people who were different from him. I think we all know that Terra Lekota was at his happiest as a Mosotho, dressed in his blanket and hat, but he was more at home as well in reaching out to other people. When he became premier, there were some of these very recalcitrant Afrikaner farmers. He would pick up the phone and say, "Ek kom Sondag by jou braai." And if they say, "No, no, no," he'd say, "Ek kom." And that was the building of a non-racial presence in a part of the country that had not quite understood what that non-racialism was about. He conducted himself in this way. I'm saying he was the proudest Mosotho, happiest in his Kobo and his Mokoroto. The diversity of ourselves as a people was part of what shaped him. But he also didn't suffer fools. The Premier said we must tell all the stories, and there's an important story. Comrade Terra was Premier for a short 2 years. He was recalled because he wasn't going to suffer fools, and he went onto the radio and called out their bad behavior. He was loved because he was as honest as he was in all his interactions. And sometimes he was obstinate and he was difficult, but that didn't detract from the love that so many have had for him. The obstinacy was part of his charm. He would take offbeat positions on all manner of issues and then say, hey, okay, I'm sorry, I retract. But that was terror. I want to end this little tribute with a wonderful poem from the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. It was a great poem, So Is My Life, speaks to how we knew terror. He writes, my duty moves along with my song. I am not, that is my destiny. I exist not if I cannot attend to the pain of those who suffer. They are my pains. For I cannot be without existing for all who are silent and oppressed. I come from the people and I sing for them. My poetry is song and punishment. I am told you belong to the darkness. Perhaps, but I walk to the light. I am the man of bread and fish, and you will not find me among books, but with women and men, they have taught me the infinite. Rest in peace, our dear comrade and friend. You'll be sorely missed. Thank you.
Program Director, the Lekota family, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, esteemed mourners, I am honored and privileged to have been chosen from amongst very many comrades to speak at this very solemn occasion of the burial of Comrade Terra Lekota. I speak not therefore for my family and myself, but I speak for thousands of comrades, friends, and even millions of South Africans whose lives Comrade Terra touched and who would have liked to be here with us, but were limited by time and space. Dear Cynthia Kotani Makubutu, Kopano, Laurent Palesa, Luan, and all of you, the siblings of Terra. We think that the big hand of tragedy that has visited you before has once again touched you. And it touched many of us, and it touched the entire nation. Because as Trevor said, Terra was larger than life, was a national hero and a national leader. His work and its impact reverberated across the length and breadth of the Republic of South Africa. As we stand here today, therefore, our hearts go out to all of you, joining many South Africans who are conveying their condolences to you on this huge loss that you have suffered. We join hands in prayer that your souls and broken hearts may be healed. And we say this because we believe that God is near those with broken hearts. Today, as we lay Terra to his remains to rest, we do not just mourn his death, but we celebrate his life. As Trevor pointed out, his journey of life is a tapestry of episodes and struggle phases that brought all of us the political freedom that we currently enjoy. He was a student activist, leader of the South African Student Organization, underground operative of the ANC, and transitioned to building of mass grassroots organization, which culminated in the formation of the biggest coalition of organizations of the people, the United Democratic Front. This was the biggest front since the Congress Alliance. But at the same time, the struggles that was unfolding led to the resurgence of the trade union movements, which led to the formation of single federations, such as COSATU and the National Federation of Trade Unions. Today we have the South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU. The common thread that ran through all of these phases of our struggle was a determination to dismantle the apartheid system. The apartheid system, which was a common cause of anguish to all South Africans. That dismantlement of apartheid was a unifying goal under the overarching liberation movement, consisting of different political organizations, trends, and tendencies. And during that period, countless activists from different organizations and tendencies made enormous sacrifices. Collectively, these episodes represent a continuum of struggle. Each episode was a product of its time and conditions. And the forms and levels of organizations were spawned by the circumstances of that time, and these organizations operated at different times. But one cannot disparage to any extent the role of each phase or each episode of our struggle, each form of organization. All of them collectively contributed to define the freedom that we ultimately got. And the journey of terror, therefore, exemplifies these different episodes of struggle and their accompanying sacrifices. His series of detentions, torture, imprisonment, his courage, his spirit of no surrender, and his determination never to allow the situation that was imposed on us by the oppressive and exploitative system. And he argued that we should not allow the situation we live in to live in us. That message is an eloquent testament of his patriotism. It's an eloquent testament for his love of our people. Comrade Terra belonged to a generation of tried and tested South Africans. It is a generation steeled in the crucible of struggle. A generation whose determination was to dismantle apartheid and usher in freedom and social emancipation. Throughout his life, his character was defined by selflessness and love for South Africa and his people. He believed that living selfishly for oneself and not as part of a collective in the service of society was meaningless. Like a true revolutionary that he was, he understood that his lifelong happiness would derive only from the collective happiness and comfort of society as a whole. The generosity of spirit was the hallmark that defined Terra's character. He was a true revolutionary and a compatriot. He had the wisdom to recognize early enough in his life that the apartheid system had divided communities and society, and that these communities needed to be organized and united in action in the struggle to free South Africa. He had faith in the power of organization and the capacity of the galvanized masses to defeat the system of oppression and exploitation. He understood that the masses, not the individual leaders, were the makers of history. Like many of us, he was sustained by the vision of non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa. Like one before his, the generation like one before terror's generation, and in pursuit of freedom. He, Terra, participated in the struggle to pursue the goals that those who came before him pursued. And in his sacrifices, determination, courage, he distinguished himself and earned himself the title Hero of the People. I must say I worked with Terra, and I was privileged that from time to time I could accompany him into detention, into some trials, and come out with him and still see this amazing energy that he exuded all the time. He was a resilient guy, tenacious. And in Terra's vocabulary, the word defeat or failure did not exist. He never gave up on the goal he pursued. He was stubborn to the end. He was like a bulldog. The man was brave and strong like a bull. And his exuberance caused him to travel across the length and breadth of South Africa, organizing, talking to activists and addressing rallies. More often than ever, where terror has been, there would be resurgence and uprisings, masses mobilized and fighting unrest in those areas. But Terra was by no means a demagogue. He was rational and factual in the presentation of his case to the people, because he believed that people had to be persuaded to understand who we are, where we are going to, and why they must be part of this program that we are leading of liberation of South Africa. Both Terra and I, together with Trevor, were in 1983 elected to the National Executive of the United Democratic Front. Terra and I were charged with the responsibility of setting up the national office, consolidating the 3 regions of the UDF that formed it, build new organizations, and accelerate the launch of 5 other regions that had not been launched: the Northern Transvaal, Northern Cape, the Free State, Eastern Cape, the border region, to make sure that by the end of that year and before the tricameral parliament was implemented, that these organizations were ready to take the challenge to the parliament in Cape Town and Pretoria. So, having been elected to the UDF, mass organization was what we were doing. We traveled throughout the country to small towns like Parys, to Mahole, Huhudi in Vryburg, Kroonstad, where we met with Derek Bloom and got him there into trouble as well, building organization everywhere, meeting with the farmers throughout the country. And I recall one evening when Terra and I were sitting around the fire with Cas Himan. Cas Himan became one of our earlier members of parliament in the Free State. Cas Himan had organized all the farmers for us to address about the changes that the ANC had intended to bring about, because that was now the period after the unbanning of the ANC. And we needed to ensure that we rallied behind the program of the ANC, all these farmers and the Afrikaners, including the right-wingers, to make sure that they become part of that process of nation building and consolidation of the unity of our people. Terra talks about the energy of Terra. That energy got us into trouble. When we left Tumahole at Barrage, the army, the police, the intelligence services were already there because they were told that Terra and I were in Tumahole inciting the people. Stopped me, found in my car publications of SACTU organized or staff, the Freedom Charter, UDF Declaration, T-shirts of the UDF, and they took each one of them. Terra, in the meantime, had gone to Kronstadt. In Kronstadt, he whipped up the emotions of the people there, and they rose against the local government leaders there. In the Vaal, when we went, the Terra moved to the people. So by 1984, when we were in detention, that spirit that inspired the people of the Vaal was still with them. They moved on through protest to demolish all systems, institutions of government, and unfortunately in the process, 5 councillors were killed. We were charged, and when we got charged in the Delmas High Treason, all the things we did in the Vaal, in Tumahole, in Huhudi, and other parts of the country, constituted that long indictment, which consisted of the charge of 5 murders, sedition, high treason, public violence, terrorism, and so forth. So all of those things were saying to the Nationalist Party government, these are part of the ANC and Communist Party program of overthrowing the state by violence. But there's a very interesting point one needs to say about Terra when we were on trial. When we looked at the indictment and the behavior of the judge, Justice Kies van Dijkhost, and one of his assessors, we concluded that this is a clear political trial. We will not be acquitted in this trial. The men had found us guilty already. That time, Trevor and them, Vali Musa, they were barred from speaking for the UDF. The UDF was restricted, to all intents and purposes banned. Terra said in his wisdom, this court represents a platform for the UDF and the forces of liberation. We should not be trying to defend ourselves much here. We should be more concerned about conveying the message of freedom to the people of South Africa, to the world as a whole, and to tell the world how great that future that we're working towards is going to be, and how that future is important for the unity of all of South Africans. Of course, it's now recorded history that in that trial, we were all found guilty. Found guilty. But before we were found guilty, during the trial, suspecting that we were dealing with a brooder bond on the bench, we investigated and found in the book by Breitenbach, the book called Confessions of the Adbilo Terrorist, that the assessor sitting there with Van Dijkhost, who continued after Van Dijkhost dismissed the Professor William Joubert, who had told him that, hey, man, I don't know, these people are innocent. You complain about their signature campaign. I have signed that declaration because it's an innocent document. Van Dijkhost couldn't take kindly to that. He fired the assessor on the spot. And when we found that the other one was a brooder bond, we launched an application for a recusal of Van Dijkhost and that assessor. But of course, he threatened to dismiss our lawyers. So we were found guilty. We had to come back later to lead the campaign for the re-establishment of the ANC. But there were some interesting moments of our time with terror. One day we had a luncheon with a diplomat from the British Embassy as we were trying to lobby international support for the country. And during that luncheon, I was introduced to a drink called Southern Comfort. Southern Comfort. It was a whiskey-flavored liqueur. And every time we went to dinner and supper with Tara, I would say, I want Southern Comfort. And Tara teased me about that. Everywhere I went, he says, this guy, you invite him, even if it is for breakfast. And instead of having coffee, he's going to order Southern Comfort. That was Tara for you, a man with a great sense of humor. But let me conclude now. Trevor talked of terror, and I said terror is a bull, brave, and he would not relent in what he was doing. From time to time, we will have to say to terror, terror, now it's time for you to stop. Go and see your family, man. We've been in the field for too long. Go home. Go and see Cynthia and the children. His life was the struggle for freedom. There was no other life for him because the struggle was in his DNA. So he was that kind of a man. He would work not sleepy. One time he drives there in the Villiers Street in town, and he drives into the shopping center with a red Corolla 1.6. He was very tired because he was not resting. That was terror for you. Now, finally, I think what all of these things that we have said about terror is that terror was part of the great generation of heroes whose determination and sustained service to humanity inspired in us indomitable faith and hope in the future that we're building. Hope in the non-racial, sexist, democratic, and prosperous South Africa. May
Long live the fighting spirit of Comrade Mosiuoa Lekota, long live. The trio, Dr. Deliza, in Mosiuoa Lekota's milestones, and herein lies the significance of an unwavering dedication to fighting against apartheid and his commitment to public service, and what later shaped the transition to South Africa's democracy. Now what we'll do is to request Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Balula, to come forward
has visited our ranks once again. It has taken from us silenced the voice that spoke firmly in defense of justice and democratic values. But death cannot erase the contribution of a life dedicated to the emancipation of others. The legacy of Comrade Terra Lekota lives not in this moment of sorrow, but in the history of struggle that he helped to shape. Those who knew him will remember his clarity of thought. They will remember the sharpness of his intellect and the firmness of his convictions. He was not a man who sought comfort in silence when truth demanded to be spoken. He was a man who believed that leadership requires courage, the courage to confront injustice, even when doing so invites misunderstanding or criticism. Comrade Lekota possessed that rare quality of the genuine revolutionary. He understood that freedom must always be defended, even after it has been achieved. He believed deeply that democracy requires constant vigilance and honest debate. From the earliest chapters of his life, he understood that liberation of the oppressed required discipline, organization, and sacrifice. He committed his youthful years to the struggle for freedom. He endured persecution and imprisonment because he believed that the dignity of our people was not negotiable. And when freedom finally dawned upon our land, he continued to serve with dedication, helping to build the democratic institutions of our country. Throughout his life, Comrade Terra remained a man of principle. He believed that leadership must always be guided by conscience. He believed that power without moral purpose becomes dangerous. And he believed that the liberation movement must remain faithful to the values that inspired the sacrifices of generations of freedom fighters. What led Comrade Terra to serve us as the ANC with divorce papers and formed COPE was because he was arguing that the ANC have veered away from its very values, and why he joined the African National Congress. Sometimes this commitment to principle meant that he stood apart and was misunderstood. Sometimes it meant that he spoke uncomfortable truths. But history teaches us that progress is often driven by those who are prepared to think independently and act with integrity. Comrades and friends, the passing of Comrade Terra Lekota reminds us that the struggle for justice is never the work of one generation alone. Each generation receives the torch of freedom from those who came before, and each generation carries the responsibility of passing it forward. Mosiuoa Lekota was not just part of the struggle against apartheid. He was one of its firm and determined leaders. After his release from Robben Island in 1982, where he had been imprisoned for his work with the South African Students' Organization, Comrade Terra Lekota returned to the struggle with renewed determination. When the UDF was launched in 1983, he became one of its key organizers and served as its national publicity secretary, helping to mobilize communities and strengthen the growing mass movement against apartheid. His work helped organize ordinary people to stand together against injustice and to speak out against oppression. At a time when the apartheid government tried to silence opposition through fear, arrests, and repression, Comrade Terra helped build a strong nationwide movement of grassroots resistance. His leadership and courage made him a target of the regime, which led to his arrest and prosecution in the Delmas treason trial. The trial was more than a court case. It was an attempt by apartheid state to label the struggle for freedom as a crime. Like many leaders of his generation, Comrade Terra faced this challenge with courage. History has since recognized his role as part of the broader fight for South Africa's freedom. Even during the period when he led the Congress of the People, Comrade Terra Lekota never concealed what his political heart truly rested with the ANC and its historic mission. He reminded us time and again that our freedom must never drift from the proud traditions of the Congress movement or abandon the guiding vision of the Freedom Charter. His message was simple but firm. The struggle was never about positions or platforms, but about remaining faithful to the principles that united our people in the fight for freedom. The life of Comrade Lekota stands as a reminder that patriotism is not measured by words alone. It is measured by the courage to serve the people honestly. It is measured by the willingness to defend democratic values even when it is difficult. It is measured by the determination to build a society founded on dignity, equality, and justice. Today, we bid farewell to a veteran of the liberation struggle, a patriot who dedicated his life to the service of South Africa, a man whose journey reflected both the triumphs and the challenges of our democratic project. As we lay Comrade Terra Mosiuoa Lekota to rest, we do so knowing that the earth does not simply receive what is buried within it. The earth nurtures seeds, and from seeds, new life emerges. The life of Comrade Lekota is such a seed of hope. From it will grow new generations who will continue the work of building a just and democratic South Africa. Allow me, Program Director, as I conclude, to tell you a story about the seed of hope. In a small village, struck by drought for years, the ground had turned to dust and the rivers ran dry. The villagers, once thriving farmers, had given up planting anything. Nothing grew and hope faded with each scorching day. The village and its people were visited by a winter of despair. Among them was an old man named Eli. One morning he walked out to the edge of his barren field and knelt in the dirt. From a pouch around his neck, he pulled out a single seed, a gift from his father, who had told him, always keep one seed of hope. Neighbors laughed as he dug a tiny hole and planted the seed. What's the point? They said. There hasn't been rain in years, but Eli watered the ground with the little water he could spare. Day after day, he sat by the dry soil, whispering to it, watching the sky, believing. Then one morning, a miracle happened. Clouds gathered, and a soft rain fell. The ground drank from it. A week later, a small green sprout broke forth from the ground. That sprout became a tree, and the tree bore fruit. Its roots reached deep where water still lived. From that fruit came more seeds, and from those seeds, new gardens. The village flourished again. The village flourished again, not just with crops, but with hope. We too have come here today not to build dams. We too have come here today not to drill wells. We too have come here today not to dig fountains. We too have come here today not to construct ponds. We too have come here today not to build lakes and rivers, but we have come here to sow a seed of optimism that one day, with tears of joy, Mother Nature will remember us, her children, and a beautiful leaf of hope will sprout forth from the barren of fields. We are here to join hands to plant the last remaining seed of hope, believing that one day a miracle will happen. Each one of you carries that last seed of hope. When that day finally comes, all of us will say in one accordance that indeed the harvest is plenty, yet the workers are very few. To this mourning family, we have lost a father, to his children, and a devoted husband to his wife, the pillar of your home and the quiet strength that held your family together. To the Congress of the People, we have lost a selfless leader, a man who carried the burdens of leadership with courage and conviction, and who never placed personal comfort above the cause he served. And to the people of South Africa, we have lost a patriot, a son of the soil, who dedicated his life to the struggle for justice, freedom, and the dignity of all our people. Go well, Comrade Mosiuoa Lekota, son of the struggle, servant of the people, patriot of our republic. Robala ka kgotso Mosia, tsamaya hantle motubatsi, motho wa mantsha thebe diome, a spear that shielded our drought, setlolo sa tabane, setlolo sa batlokwa, sa makgolokwe le sa baphuthi. Your journey among us has come to its earthly end, but your contribution to the freedom of this nation will remain written in the history of our people. May your spirit rest in eternal peace, and may the flame of your memory continue to guide the path of freedom. Rabala ka kgotso Mosia, Comrade Patrick Lekota. Amandla! members of the Congress of the People, friends, members of our church, the Roman Catholic Church, I recognize you. Here we are today, gathered together with heavy hearts, gathered to bid farewell to our comrade and friend, the founding father of the Congress of the People. As we give Comrade Mosiuoa Lekota his last deserved send-off, it flashes in my mind the story of Moses from the Bible. And by the way, let me make a declaration and say, I'm neither a priest nor an ardent churchgoer. But this story is found in the books of Deuteronomy 34, chapter 4 to 5. As the scripture readings go, we learn of God showing Moses the promised land. God showed Moses the promised land from a mountain. But we hear and get to know that the very same God said to Moses that he would not cross to the promised land. Program director, interesting again, somewhere we again read about one of the greatest civil rights movements in the United States of America, Dr. Martin Luther King. In this reading again, we learn that Dr. King, on the 3rd of April, told the gathering that God has allowed him to go to the mountaintop, from where he saw the promised land. But he told the gathering that he might not be there with them when they get to the promised land. Isn't it then ironic that we are gathered here today to bid farewell to a man who, through his deeds and his life, must have reached the top of the mountain? In his dedication to freedom of his people and in his gallant fight against injustice, Comrade Terra reached the mountaintop where he saw and dreamt of a promised land. His departure from this earth, unfortunately, just like that of Moses and Dr. King, Comrade Terra never tasted the fruits of his toil. He never reached that promised land with his people. But because we know and understand that one can kill a revolution, but you can't kill one can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. Because revolutionary ideas and ideas live on to inspire upcoming generations. With sorrowful hearts, we are here today to bear testimony to a rich life history. A life history of a freedom fighter that touched many of our hearts and souls in many different ways. As we listen to his life and times being relayed by those who have come into contact with him, our beloved Mosiuoa Lekota will continue to be remembered that he was a faithful servant of the people. When his life history as the founding father of Congress of the People is finally written, the date of the 2nd of March 2026 will go down as a day that many of the current members of the Congress of the People, former members of the Congress of the People and supporters, and fellow South Africans, all woke up to sad news of his passing. A dark cloud has befallen us. It's hanging over our heads and across the corners of this country. On that morning, many of us wished that what we were hearing could only be a dream and not reality. The reason for this feeling was that the news were about the passing of one of this country's gallant patriots. Mosiuoa Lekota has been a man whose life has been characterized by the love for the people of South Africa, a courageous freedom fighter who had become symbolic with integrity and anti-corruption. At this point in time, the late president of COPE, Mosiuoa Lekota, is leaving us with an opportunity to reflect on ourselves. This country today needs all his sons and daughters to rise up and take up the challenge and finish what he could not finish. Save the little that is still left, so that the next generation does not spit on our graves. Love him or hate him, President Lekota was a constitutionalist, which made him a true patriot because he believed in South Africa, in the South African Constitution. He was more than a political leader because he was a guardian of principle, a man who belonged to the generation that understood sacrifice, a generation that placed the freedom of our nation above personal comfort, and the dignity of people above personal ambition. In the struggle for liberation, Mosiuoa stood firm, and in the years of democracy that followed, he became a statesman, a servant of the people whose contribution towards building this nation has been both profound and enduring. President Lekota's life was defined by courage because many at times he would do the unthinkable and tread where we say eagles don't tread. A principled individual very opposed to corruption and maladministration. A patriotic leader who believed in what is right even where it was difficult or unpopular. To him, it did not matter whether that came at a great cost. He lived by the ideals that should shape our nation, deeply believing in non-racialism, a united and just society where every person's dignity is respected. He longed for the days where in a democratic South Africa, the people would go and directly elect a president, a premier, and a mayor of their own choices. This, he believed, will enhance people's voices and ensure a government by the people. All of these, to him, were not mere political ideas, but were the moral foundation of his entire life. Let history remember him as a leader who often stood ahead of his time, because many of the concerns he raised about governance, accountability, and ethical leadership have today become the center to our national discourse. He was clearly what others preferred not to see and warned us, not out of bitterness, but out of the love for the country that he helped to build. Yet, beyond politics and public debates, there was a man, humble, principled, and full of life. Those who worked alongside him will remember him for his integrity, humility, and his unwavering belief that our nation could always be a better society, to the extent that we must never abandon the ideals that gave birth to our democracy. A reflection on his life today must also make us reflect on the responsibilities he leaves behind. The greatest tribute we can offer President Mosiuoa Lekota should not be found in our words alone, but should be found in our actions as well. This tribute should be rooted in our commitment and values he championed. Our resolve to honesty, accountability, unity, and service to our people must be beyond measure. Let us honor his memories by defining the principles he defended. Let us honor him by strengthening the democratic values he fought for, and to let us and allow ourselves to honor him by continuing to build a South Africa he envisaged and believed in, a country rooted in justice, equality, and prosperity for all. We must always remember that Comrade Terra leaves behind a legacy of principle and a legacy of unwavering patriotism. Mema Lekota and your children, speaking to you today, it can only be befitting that we thank you for sharing that Lekota with the nation and us. To his comrades, colleagues, and friends, honor the journey you traveled together in service to our country and the people of South Africa. May you carry forward the torch he held so high. And finally, may his soul rest in everlasting peace. I thank you.
Konto, konto, konto wesize. Sibona bafana, abancane, amagerila. Sibona bafana, abancane, amagerila. Siyacula ngoku. Konto, konto, konto wesize. Askuleni. Konto, konto, konto wesize. Iswa sibona bafana, abancane, amagerila. Isha sibona bafana, abancane, amagerila. Iswa konto, konto, konto wesize. Konto, konto, konto wesize. Hey, sibona bafana, abancane, amagerila. Hey, sibona bafana, abancane, amagerila. Awukhwela phezu kwebatshele, jabula mangisha.
Twaza awethu matla, matla, all power, all power. Agiluk, all power. Re atametse go fitlhella part 2 ya rona, mme go betla tsela ya dibui tsa family. Re kopa a special musical tribute by Sekoto. Besekhoto. Me ke tla kopa hore ka nako tsa a bina me Ayanda Shange le Mr. Tsele ba ba se ba ikatametsa mo. Tsele. Yone eo. Nna ke bala se sengwetswe askis. Kopa batho ba di hitara le ga le di tshwara but a ke bone go na le improvement, please a ke re aircon please.
Dumelang, I hope you're well. And I'm going to do a dedication from the family. And I hope you guys enjoy this one. And I shared my love and condolences to the family as well. Everybody's looking.
Dumelang. Maybe you'll respond better when I say Sanbona. The man that we are here to lay to rest was well versed in so many languages. And sometimes his command of isiZulu would betray his intentions. I suspect his dear wife, Antombendle, spent a lot of time lecturing him. In some cases, he'd use deep-seated Zulu words to explain simpler matters. But thank you so much, Program Director. I want to acknowledge the Deputy President of South Africa, Mr. Mashatile, former President Mbeki, and Motlanthe, the Premier of the Free State, where we are, and the broader Lekota family with its different houses, as well as all public representatives of different organizations that are represented here. Program directors, before I proceed with the message that have been tasked to extend on behalf of the Shange and T families, MTI from KZN, KwaZulu-Natal. Please allow me to, before I extend my speech, but to particularly commend and acknowledge Kotane. If you don't know, Kotane is the shortest man sitting in front. And Kotane, our families want to acknowledge your leadership at a difficult time of when your father was not well. We've seen you, Kotane, leading with humility. We've seen you leading your family quietly alongside your mother. And we've seen you fulfilling tasks with grace on behalf of the entire family, as well as the Shange families. And your father would be very proud of you. We are fully aware that he prepared you well for this season. And we all pray that for the years ahead, that God may grant you wisdom and foresight to fulfill this task. And unfortunately, Kotane, you cannot delegate this function. It is your task to lead your father's house. And today, we're here because You've become an elder despite your age, and we're here to encourage you in particular. So I stand here, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf, as I said, on behalf of the Shang and Mtis families from KwaZulu-Natal. And this is where Mrs. Lekota comes from. Mrs. Lekota is the daughter to the preeminent writer of isiZulu books, O.L. Shange. One of his books was popularly known as Injula Nokjia kwesiZulu. We all trace our roots from our great ancestor, Usanusana Kayamela Kapangandao, Otumagude. And all of us, so most of us, have traveled from different parts of KZN. Many of us have traveled from places like Ngutu. I heard Trevor Manuel mentioning Ngutu, and we also remember him when he still had that bushy hair, long beard, coming to Ngutu in the 80s himself, together with Ubabli God. This is the place where Kotana himself and his late sister, Umaschaba, spent their formative years with our late grandmother when their father was in prison. There is a lot that can be said about Mr. Lekota's political life, but I'm here to talk about what we observed in his private space outside of the glare of the cameras amongst the family members. In here, we have all the different houses of the Shange family. The 4 houses of our great ancestor, as I said, Usanusana here. We have a representative from one house of the Shange from Nkandla, not that Nkandla, Mr. Mbalula, and Mr. Lekota knew Nkandla very well, and sometimes our grandfather was an Anglican priest. He spent many years serving the people of Nkandla. So sometimes today we are reluctant to say we know Nkandla because, you know, of the different contexts that you find today. But Mr. Lekota knew Nkandla very well. He knew the people of Nkandla. He knew all of us. We also have the Shange representative from one house, from Ulundi, again, where one leg of our family tree stays, where one of our grandfather stayed. Again, he knew, forget the politics of it, but he knew Ulundi very well, not just as a politician, but because of the Shange family. But we're all here not just to lay to rest a politician or a public figure. We're here to bid farewell to a man who was known to us as Uputera for some, Umalumtera for others, and a son to our late grandmother. Despite his time in and out of prison, even young as we were, we all understood that he was fond of our grandmother. Malumtera was a big brother to our uncles, and he was fully integrated into the Shange family structure. He was fully woven into the Shange family fabric. He belonged to us, and we belonged to him. We claimed him as our own, and in that closeness, his politics became our politics. His value systems became our value systems. His worldview became our worldview. And the commitment to service became part of who we are as a family. Just because of him, one man who came to our family as umkhwenyana, as the elders would say, but over time became all that it is about us. Through his tireless work, often carried out under immense personal strains, under immense difficult political conditions, he taught us the meaning of public service. He showed us that real service demands personal sacrifice. If you want to serve, we learned from him that you give up family time. He was a man who was permanently at work, forever at work. He was not a man to lazy around in the house. You may see him in the late evening, but when you get up in the morning, he will not be around the house. He would be gone. He would have vanished. Not to do anything else, but to fulfill what he considered to be the bigger task of this country. And in order to lead, we also learned that you also pay through your sacrifice to your personal health. As we know, he was a man during his later years who wasn't well. Too many of us, too many among us aspire to leadership and shy away from the sacrifice it requires. Mr. Lekota taught us through example that leadership is not about status, it's not about your station in life. We learned that service to society comes at a price. It's not all about the glory of cameras, and there's nothing about cameras when you are indeed in service for your nation. In public, inspired through his commitment for the well-being of South Africans. In private, within the family, embodied the same compassion and humility. He carried no airs or graces about him. There was no sense of self-importance about him. Whenever he interacted with each one of us, he gave us undivided attention. In his presence, we felt seen. We felt important. He offered counsel generously, without judgment, and recognized the dignity of each one of us, regardless of who we are within the family structure. So his message in politics resonated also within the family. There's so many lessons that we can share about what he would share in private amongst and within the family setup. But I'll highlight just but one about discipline. This was a message that he was very consistent about. He shared, of course, this message through stories. As you know, Mr. Lekota could tell stories in a wonderful and in his own way, but the message was always crystal clear that knowledge is not enough, that all of us, we need to apply ourselves in whatever we do. Encourage us that all of us were agents of change wherever we are. We don't have to hold public office. I don't know anyone of my family and relatives who are active in politics, but good luck if you are there. Other thing he would say is that hope is not enough. Encourage us to individually do something and don't doubt ourselves. And we just needed to do what we needed to do. These lessons were never an invitation to his political world, but rather a call for us to take responsibility for our own lives. Don't expect someone to do something for you. Have a sense of agency about yourself. Many of us, particularly of my generation, are direct beneficiaries of Mr. Lekota's generosity. His home in Westville, Durban, became our home, became a place of safety for all the Shange family members. It became a place of comfort. It became a place of belonging. It was partly a Lekota home, but it became a Lekota Shange home. Through his support, members of my generation within the family were able to access schooling and university opportunities, were able to go to university because of his support. And in most cases, and in some cases, fees were paid for. Again, I come back to the message of his politics and what he did domestically in the family. Those who were ill, like my mother, found refuge in his home for many years with their needs fully met. He stood with us, the full Shange family, during the most difficult times. He buried our family members. He buried our grandmother. He buried our parents. He buried our relatives whenever his demanding schedule allowed. To the broader Lekota family, we are reminded of a very powerful moment that happened exactly 51 years ago, on the 17th of April, 1975. Many here were not born then, but our grandparents, Umkhulu nogogo, they released uAntombenhle from the heart of Zululand to go to the Free State, to go and build the house of Lekota. Might I remind you that their marriage vows were not exchanged in a beautiful church, accompanied by good music and celebration. They were spoken behind quiet prison walls of Pretoria Central Prison, just before he was sentenced to a long-term sentence at Robben Island. That's the commitment that they made to one another. So today, ladies and gentlemen, all of us who are here and those who are not here have traveled this far. We've come here as a broader Shange family. We've come here as witnesses to confirm that indeed the house of Lekota was built. It was built from ground up. It was family built as our grandparents had directed. I have lived in different Lekota family homes. You will not find a picture, a wedding picture in the walls of the family homes of a white wedding dress and what you would expect as a reminder of a wedding day. Precisely because those pictures could not be taken at a point in time when those vows were taken. So in life, Mr. Lekota held different roles. He occupied different positions in society, but his values never changed, whether in a private capacity or in his politics. So as we lay him to rest today, we pray that his value system will be carried out into the future by different generations. Those who are within the family from the Lekota family have a bigger duty to carry out his value system forward. And Arobalega Khotso Ntate Lekota, thank you very much.
Ra leboga, re lebogela mafoko a matshediso a tswang ko lapeng lo Shange re le mo phitlhong ya ga Ntate Lekota o tlisitse mme wa Lekota e le ngwetsi gompieno ke mma rona. Now we're having the last speaker before we go into the last government program. Ke batla go baakanya phoso ya gore ke ne ke re Ntate Tshele sebui se se latelang sa lesika lo Lekota ke Ntate Tshehla Lekota e senyeo le bonang e kwetswe hao ene le utlwa batho ba tlhasa ka yone. So the real name is Tshehla Lekota. Now, we wished for a very therapeutic burial. Up to so far, when I look at the family, I can see our inner hurt feelings being soothed. Let us soothe those who are broken-hearted like this. Ntate Lekota, as I said, if Mandela is the father of the new South Africa, Lekota is the father of the Free State. Ke a leboga.
Program Director, thank you. Ke rata ho ananela boteng ba Deputy President ya naha Ntate Mashatile, ke ananele boteng ba the former President Ntate Mbeki le Ntate Mutante. Ka lehlohonolo Program Director e ka sita le mopremiri ba mfokoleditse mosebetsi ka o ananela bohle ba hlomphehang e ka sita le mekga yohle yeo Ntate Lekota Mosiuoa ngwaneso a neng a amana le yona. Yes, he is gone. He's gone and left the whole family's hearts broken. Our hearts are not broken for nothing. They are broken because we have a great loss. In spite of all this, I say, we can mourn that we have lost, or we can choose to celebrate this God-given gift that is Mosiuoa, our brother. We as the family, friends as well, went to hospital many times and we saw how he fought for his dear life. And he fought fiercely, but at the end, he had to surrender, and surrender he did. He made peace with it, and we as the family must do the same. Outside the family, we could see that Mosiuoa was highly regarded. He was the premier, He was the chairperson of the NCOP, Minister of Defense, President of COPE, and many other organizations. Red carpets could be rolled out wherever he went. But funny enough, in the family, in spite of all that, he never showed or demonstrated even the smallest sign that he was that high person. He was just Mosiuoa. He was just ordinary. He was just humble. He was just one of us. He loved his family very much. I remember when he got out of prison in 1982, he made means to make sure that the family knows he is out of prison. I remember very well that he drove the Corolla car to Wesselsbron, that he was just to let us know that he was out of prison. I can't forget that day. The day was there. I never knew that there are so many police vans in Wesselsbron. It was like they were patrolling my house. Whenever you looked outside, you would see a police van passing. And we got scared. I asked him, "Hey, Munna, it is our turn now to get arrested." And then he answered me calmly and said, "No, brother, don't worry. It is just a big dust that will soon, very soon, settle down." Coming to the closeness of the family, he once came to my house with Mareka Mtimkulu, his friend. We were busy making braai with my wife, just a piece of braai with my wife. Do you know what happened? They went straight to the braai place and ate almost that meat up. And then what we did, we were very hungry. And to make another braai, it will take us 30 to 45 minutes. Rile rashebana le mofumahadi. Ka re he ausi, mme lebese le teng ka fridge-ing. Ha re je papa ka lebese o fele. You can imagine, from a nice lamb chops to papa ka lebese. But we were happy because they got something out of my eyes. Not forgetting, we won't forget the many blessed boke, the many velde biese that he gave us after hunting. That was Mosiuoa, who felt free and comfortable with the family. Coming to jokes, I wish you could find him together with another brother of his, Mosiuoa Lekota. You can imagine, he's a Kimuruti le political. You can make out what will come out of the two. The two some as a sames, yo so yo tong en kakabiene uitgelag. He was very supportive to the family. Each and every event that the family had, you would see Mosiuoa there. He gave the elders full respect, which is a good lesson and a good example to the young ones. The age between me and him was not so wide, but I was always humbled by the respect he always showed to me. Lastens wil ek net sê, ek het 'n boervriend gehad. Hy was 'n Afrikaner. Hy het altyd gesê, volgens hom, die lewe het 2 dele. En dit is die lewe onder 30 jare en die lewe oor 70 jare. Die onder 30-jarigers het die toekoms. En al die toekoms lê voor hulle. Die onder 30 jarigs, as hulle sterf, dan heel die mense, dan kla ons en sê allerhande dinge. Ons sal sê, hy is te jong, ons het baie verwag van hom af, en hy is weg. En ek stem saam met hulle, want die toekoms vir hulle is gesnoep. Op die ander kant, die oor 70-jarigers het nie die toekoms nie, maar hulle het geskiedenis. Hulle het hulle toekoms deurgeleer. Wat hulle het is die geskiedenis. Mosiuoa het wyd geloop. Mosiuoa het diep trappe getrap. Hy het diep trappe getrap nasionaal. Hy het diep trappe getrap in die familie. I just want to say to Mosiuoa, Mantabiseng, to Kotani, and all his siblings, to the Shange family, to the Lekota family, the Sitai family, and all who knew him. Kiri, Bahesu, ha risikeng ransa dikhapa. Rimpe rinse miyokho. Impa ising miyokho yatabo. Impa miyokho yateboho. Mosiuoa lived to live. I thank you.
Re a leboha Ntate Tshehla, ons is dankbaar vir die toespraak. Lekker Afrikaans gepraat Ntate Tshehla. Re a leboha. Re lebohile haholo ka nnete ke family, ba re fa botho. Hore na Ntate Mosiuoa Lekota o shape-uwe ke value system e Ntate Lekota a e phelang, both lapeng, even in service to the society. Now we have reached a point where we would invite the address, or rather put it as is on the program, the Eulogy, by the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. And for that task, I'll request you to help me to welcome the Deputy President as he proceeds to the stage. Please help me to welcome the Deputy President to give the eulogy in honor of this great giant, Ntate Mosiuoa Lekota.
Tina Sizwe
Tina sizwe sikalela sikalela elatatwa namamhlophe Tina sizwe Tina sizwe sikalela sikalela elatatwa namamhlophe mama uyeke mama uyeke mama uyeke mama uyeke Tina sizwe Tina sizwe sikalela sikalela elatatwa elatatwa namamhlophe mama uyeke mama uyeke umhlaba wethu 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 amandla
ha ke leboge batsamaisi ba mosebetsi ba lapa la Lekota ba lapa la Shange mme wa rona mme Cynthia bana kaofela ditlogolo meloko le metswalle ke tlisa matshediso go lona go tswa go mmuso wa rona mmuso wa Afrika Borwa ke re tshedisegang. Honorable Premier of the Free State, who has welcomed us here this morning, Honorable Letsoha Matai, we thank you for that warm welcome. Former Presidents Thabo Mbeki, Kgalema Motlanthe, and Sis Gugu. Let me also recognize the leaders of the Congress of the People, recognize leaders of all political parties here present with us, Secretary General of the African National Congress, recognize all the speakers from different parts of the country, members of parliament, speakers of provincial legislatures, recognize all councillors, MMCs, premiers from all our provinces, ministers, deputy ministers. Let me recognize our traditional leaders. Dikhosi tsa rona le marena kaofela a le teng kajeno mona re a le hlompha, religious leaders and all members of the clergy, veterans of our struggle for liberation, fellow mourners, dumelang kaofela. Today we gather as a nation united in grief, remembrance and gratitude to bid farewell to a towering figure of our liberation struggle and the democratic state. We honor Ntate Terra Lekota, a giant whose life was defined by uncompromising dedication to justice and service to the people. Ntate Lekota's political journey traversed the defining epochs of modern South Africa. From ideological awakening of black consciousness to the front lines of the United Democratic Front, the leadership corridors of the ANC National Executive Committee, and ultimately the founding of the Congress of the People. His life was lived in pursuit of a better South Africa, marked always by honesty, integrity, and courage. Ntate Lekota understood that leaders are transient, but the Congress as an ideal of unity and justice is eternal. He knew that the measure of a leader is not how long he holds office, but how faithfully he serves the covenant of Congress. From Dr. A.B. Kuma's reminder that to Congress we are loyal, to the steadfast guardianship of Sisulu and Tambo, that covenant has been passed like a torch across generations. Ntate Lekota carried that torch with unyielding fidelity. He stood as proof that while names may fade from ballots, the Congress ideal remains a beacon of unity, a compass of justice and hope for the people. Ntate Lekota understood that leadership is not command, but service. For him, democracy was never a distant set of rules. It was a living instrument to transform the lives of ordinary people. He dedicated himself to ensuring that the Constitution became a shield for the vulnerable and a bridge across the chasm of inequality. He remained an outspoken voice, reminding all of us that democracy requires vigilance and principled leadership. Comrade Terra Lekota's activism, as we all know, began in the 1970s with the South African student organization SASO, where together with comrades like Steve Biko, Bani Pichana, and others championed black consciousness and the liberation of the oppressed communities. His imprisonment on Robben Island alongside former President Nelson Mandela deepened his conviction that freedom was non-negotiable. From his youth through the United Democratic Front, the infamous treason trial of Delmas, and into government, his journey was marked by sacrifice and service. As Premier of the Free State, the first Premier of the Free State, Honorable Lekota stepped into a province scarred by apartheid and laid the foundation of a united, non-racial government. He was instrumental in forming the provincial administration and embarking on a long journey to build a government that served all citizens. As chairperson of the National Council of Provinces and later Minister of Defense under President Mbeki, he carried the burdens of leadership with dignity. He envisioned a defense force not as an instrument of repression, but as a guardian of democracy and peace, a vision that continues to guide us even today. In guiding the Defense Force, Minister Lekota ensured that the instruments of war became guidance of peace, transforming them into protectors of democracy, still in its infancy. His vision was clear, that the strength of a nation lies not in its weapons, but in its ability to reconcile, to heal, and to live in harmony. Ntate Lekota strongly believed that reconciliation was not weakness, but strength. Peace was not the absence of struggle, but the triumph of justice. He reminded us that democracy is not a gift, but a responsibility, a constant refrain that challenges each generation to guard and nurture it. President Cyril Ramaphosa captured his essence quite clearly when he said the following: Ntate Mosiuoa Lekota belonged to a generation of leaders who placed the interests of the people above their own, who understood that freedom demands sacrifice and that democracy must be defended with courage and integrity. Indeed, these words by the President captured the essence of a life lived in service of South Africa. Ntate Lekota stood among those who carried the heavy burden of resistance, who risked their freedom so that ours can be secured. During the turbulent days of student activism, he would arrive at meetings with nothing but just a notebook in his hand and conviction in his voice. He would listen carefully, then rise with calm authority and remind everyone that our struggle is not for ourselves, it is for the generations to come. That was his gift, to turn passion into discipline and discipline into action. From his student activism, with comrades like Steve Biko, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, to his leadership in government, he carried the vision of a South Africa that is non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and united. He held steadfast to the ideals of the ANC's Bill of Rights and the 1955 Freedom Charter, that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. One thing that also made him an exceptional comrade was his remarkable ability to engage across political and ideological divides. while remaining firmly anchored in the values of the Freedom Charter. In moments of heated debate, he was never swayed by partisanship or personal gain. Instead, he returned again and again to the Charter's call for unity, equality, and shared belonging. This fidelity made him not only a defender of constitutionalism, but also a reconciler, a leader who could listen, who could reason, and who could remind us that our democracy is strongest when it embraces diversity and diversity of thought while holding fast to the principles that unite us. Ntate Lekota's passing during Human Rights Month, just before the 30th anniversary of our Constitution is celebrated, urges a reflection on whether we have honored the rights and freedoms for which he dedicated his life and effort. His passing compels us to ask ourselves whether we are living up to the promise of the rights and freedoms for which he labored. This is a question that demands deep introspection and honest reflection. It is a question that calls us to measure our progress not by ceremony and speeches alone, but by the lived reality of dignity, equality, and justice in the daily lives of our citizens. Indeed, we have walked far since 1994, but we cannot yet claim to have arrived. How can we say we have arrived when there is a child who has met every requirement for a degree but still stands on the verge of opportunity with no employment? How can we say we have arrived when there is gender-based violence that remains one of South Africa's most devastating and persistent human rights violations? Violence continues, not in a distant place, but in our homes, in our relationships, in our communities. As a society, we must all play a role in challenging harmful norms that normalizes GBV. How can we say we have arrived when there are still many who carry the highest income inequality? How can we say we have arrived when uneven opportunities continue to divide our people? Progress without opportunity is incomplete. Freedom without dignity is unfinished. And justice without inclusion is unfulfilled. Nevertheless, we can state without hesitation that Honorable Lekota's footprint is indelible in the milestones of our democracy. His hand is evident in the triumph of universal suffrage, in the expansion of housing and healthcare, in the opening of classrooms and the provision of social grants. These achievements are the bricks and mortar of dignity and the lifelines of hope for our people. In democracy, in human rights, in infrastructure, and in social development, his legacy is etched into the very fabric of our nation. Those who walked this journey with Honorable Lekota remember him as a leader of conscience, discipline, and integrity. Former President Thabo Mbeki has often reminded us that true leaders understand power as responsibility, not reward. In this tradition, Tate Lekota stood out as a principled defender of our constitution and constitutionalism, as a defender of collective leadership and strong democratic institutions. Former President Kgalema Motlanthe, himself a custodian of unity and ethical leadership within our ranks, has spoken of humility in power and fidelity to constitutional values. These principles found deep expression in Tate Lekota's life, a leader whose moral authority flowed not from office, but from service, not from title, but from trust, not from privilege, but from the people. His life reminds us that true leadership is not measured by titles, but by values upheld and trust earned. Ladies and gentlemen, Tate Lekota's contribution did not end with a struggle for freedom. In our democratic government, he carried forward the same determination, turning his energy to challenges that continue to face our people. He understood that political freedom must be matched by social and economic justice. In all his endeavors, he was determined to create opportunities for every child to learn, for every worker to earn a decent living, and for every family to live with dignity. He believed that education was the key for breaking the cycle of poverty, that skills development was the bridge to employment, and that empowering the youth was the surest way to secure their future. Tate Lekota was a man who told the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. He did not chase popular acclaim, he chased justice. His integrity was not for sale, nor was his commitment to the downtrodden found wavering. He believed that the true measure of our liberation was not in the opulence of the few, but in the dignity of the poor. He was clear that corruption robs the poor, inequality divides the nation, and unemployment steals hope. He challenged us to confront these realities with honesty and courage, and to govern not for ourselves, but for the millions who look to democracy as a promise of a better life. Most of us sitting here today are aware that Tate Lekota spoke truth to power, even when it came at a great personal cost to his political career. In the ANC and in opposition benches, he acted with deep-seated integrity, embodying the belief that public office is a calling to serve the people and not oneself. Perhaps his most profound contribution was his belief that a nation divided by atrocities of apartheid could not prosper without profound healing. He understood that wounds of our past were deep, emotional, psychological, and physical. Yet, he believed in the power of reconciliation, not as forgetting, but as facing the truth to lance the boil of hatred. If we draw from Comrade Lekota's life and convictions, his voice on today's conflicts would be clear and principled. He would likely remind leaders that democracy and sovereignty must be defended through dialogue, not domination. I believe that his refrain would echo that true strength lies not in weapons, but in the ability to reconcile, to heal, and to move forward together. The world does not need war. We do not need any violence and destruction. What humanity needs is the courage to resolve our differences in peace, in negotiations, and in diplomacy. This was the conviction that Ntate Lekota carried all the time. That dialogue is stronger than division. That reconciliation is greater than retaliation. And that peace is the highest form of justice. Even now, in his passing, Ntate Lekota has achieved what so few can. His death has brought us together. He has forced us to pause, look beyond our political divides. As a principal leader who valued dialogue, we should continue in his spirit to use the context of the national dialogue for engagement and coming together to shape the next chapter of our democracy. I must further highlight that Ntate Lekota's life speaks powerfully to the spirit and purpose of our government. Long before cooperation across political lines became a constitutional arrangement, he practiced it as a leadership value, understanding that unity across differences is a foundation of social cohesion and nation building. While his departure leaves us a void, his legacy as a committed freedom fighter who sacrificed his own freedom for ours will never be forgotten. As we bid farewell to Ntate Lekota, we embrace his enduring values and vision alongside our mourning. Today we must recommit ourselves to unity across difference, to justice without compromise, and to building a South Africa that truly belongs to all who lives in it. To Marona, Mayor Cynthia, to the children, the grandchildren, to the families, and all the relatives, we thank you for having shared this titan with our nation. Though his voice is silent now, the echoes of his courage will resonate for generations to come. Rere Robalaka Khotso Patrick Mosiuoa Lekota, your journey on this earth is now complete, but the freedom you fought for lives on. Your life will remain a compass for our democracy, and your values will continue to guide our nation for many years to come. Robala ka khotso moetapele wa rona. Thank you very much.
Once again, can we recognize the eulogy by the Deputy President? Thank you, Deputy President, for such moving eulogy, words of comfort, and also telling us that Lekota may have left us, but his revolutionary spirit lives on. As we bid him farewell, let's pick up the baton and carry forward the struggle for total liberation and justice in South Africa. The fight is not over. Thank you very much, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. And at this stage now, I am going to make announcements. This announcement is, whereas I recognize that Jacobus van Straten, the chaplain, will be proceeding. I'm making these announcements that immediately after the benediction by the chaplain, the family and the deputy president are requested to follow the police procession. Due to limited space at the cemetery, we kindly request that the only members of the family, the deputy president, and the designated mourners should proceed to the cemetery. And these categories are aware of this preparation. All other mourners are requested to remain in this venue for refreshments. So, ushers will guide the family members to the transport as arranged. But now I take this opportunity to hand over to Subs Chaplain, Colonel Reverend Jacobus van Straten, to take us through this important session of the official funeral. Thank you.
Mayor Lekota, Deputy President Paul Mashatile, former Presidents Kgalema Motlanthe and Thabo Mbeki, Premier of Free State, all dignitaries present, all protocol observed. We're reading this afternoon Psalm 23. This psalm is well known, as this psalm is said by most people and is one of the psalms that people know by heart. I'm reading from verse 1. A psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Please allow me to use the words brothers and sisters at this point. Brothers and sisters, usually when we approach the psalm, we hear the words, or we think of the image of the Lord as my shepherd. But today, I want us to look at the second part of the psalm and to ponder upon that. Just as the Lord is our shepherd, and as we see that he is a good shepherd, the Lord is also our host. And as we are grieving And as we are mourning and as we're remembering the life of Ntate Mosiuoa Lekota, I think it will help us to take a few moments and stand still at these last two verses. If we say the Lord is not only our shepherd, we say he is also our host. And therefore, I'm just going to read these two verses again and make some comments as we go along. In the first place, the Lord prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies, which means that enemies does not have any power over us. The Lord anoints his guests' heads with oil. And when you sit at his table, your cup overflows. Then we find these words, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. And if we look at the Hebrew language here, specifically the meaning of the words follow me can be, and I would argue should be, translated to chase down or hand down, because in the Bible, this is the only place where the word radaf is translated with shall follow me. To try to understand this image, I want to transport you for a moment back to the ancient world, to the ancient Levant. Let us consider that there were no hotels or guest houses. Roads were not tarred. In the ancient world, they could not even complain about potholes. En route to where one would travel, there was many dangers, strangers that you would find on the road. You could easily be mugged. So by evening, it was important that when you got to a village, that you would go to the water pit or to the well and stand there and wait for someone to either do one of two things, either to invite you in or to tell you to go your way. And this is the image that we should think of when we think of the Lord as our host. Now, there was a hospitality code in the ancient world where when a traveler arrives and someone would invite him in, the moment that he was invited by that citizen or that person from the village, he entered into a binding host-guest relationship. The host invites the guest, and by doing so, he provides him with protection for at least 3 days. 3 days, no one can do anything to the guest because the host keeps him safe. Furthermore, he would give him food and lodging and make sure that he has enough to eat to survive so that he can again go on his way. A bad thing that sometimes happened was that some hosts would, for this period of 3 days, see what the traveler had as belongings. And literally afterwards, after this 3 days have succeeded and they were on their way, literally in that time, or after that time, he would send out people to chase down that person and to rob him. So the traveler were in a very awkward situation. And this is within this context that we should hear the words of the psalm that God is our host. In God's presence, He prepares a table for us. He anoints our heads with oil. But more than that, there's no 3-day host-guest relationship. And the only things that can chase you down afterwards are goodness and the mercy of God. In some translations, it's translated with loving kindness. And that brings us to the point where if we are so, how long should I remain in God's presence and in His house? Then the answer is very clear. Forever, all the days of my life. Me, Lekota, family, we are not only recognizing Ntate Lekota's departure from here, but we're also struggling with our own emotions and with our own grief. And I think it's important that we should realize that we are all hosts in God's presence. When God hosts us, He does not abandon us. Actually, He ensures that our cup overflows. And in this time of grief, this is our prayer, that the only things that may chase you down or may hound you is His goodness and His mercy. Amen. Before I pronounce the benediction, you have heard already that there's only a certain amount of people that will be going to the graveside, and that has been arranged. Ladies and gentlemen, however, we ask you that as the cortege is going to move out, that you will allow us space to do the ceremonial part of here at the venue. We are almost at the end of it. I'm going to request at this point for the marshalling officer, Lieutenant Colonel Mosiuoa, to come to the front. The moment that I have pronounced the benediction, he will give us further direction after I have moved down and after the pallbearers and the bearers have taken their place, just after the benediction. He will give you further direction in terms of the funeral. Let's rise for the pronouncement of the benediction. May the love of God the Father and the fellowship of Jesus Christ with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit be with you now and forevermore. Amen.
You may all be seated. Thank you, Ntate Moruti. Let me start by greeting our Deputy President, Ntate Paul Mashatile, our former President in our midst, all ministers in our midst, the Premier of Free State, Divisional Commissioner of Visual Policing and Operations, General Motateli, and all generals, our MECs, Mayor of Amangaung, family of Ntate Lekota, and the congregation at large. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Mosiuoa, who is going to be the marshalling officer for this special official funeral, category 2. My job is just the little one whereby I'm going to announce the order of proceedings from the church to the gravesite and then at the gravesite. Then I'm going to announce again that please, when we leave here, the congregation must give us a chance to go out, and then from there they will use the very same door that we used to go outside. And even outside, they must give us a space where the whole procession is going to form up. And the procession is going to be as follows. We are going to call our pallbearers and bearers to come inside to take the coffin. Then in front of the coffin, it will be our chaplain. Then it will be the bearers. And then behind the bearers, it will be the pallbearers. Behind the pallbearers, it will be our deputy president, together with at least 3 members of the family. That is to cut short the long procession. Then behind them, it will be our police chief mourners. Behind the police chief mourners, it will be the family of Ntate Lekota. And then outside, the formation will be in this way. When we get out of the door there will be our leading detachment form up in the form of a guard of honor, so that when we pass, they'll be able to give the respect. And then it will be the hearse. In front of the hearse, it will be Tate Muruti Hape, and then it will be our band. Then we will give chance to the family to get into their vehicles before we move. And then please, when we move, all other members who will be going, or congregation that will be going to the gravesite, please do not overtake us, because when we get somewhere from here out of the gate, there's somewhere we're going to stop, and then we break, get into the vehicles so that we can rush to the gravesite. Then when you see us rush into the gravesite, please don't rush with us. Don't drive fast with us, because we need to form up again when we get that site. There's a point whereby we're going to stop, and then we form up, wait for the hearse and the family to arrive, so that after that we continue. At the gravesite, there's no space. That's the reason they say, it was mentioned that not everyone will be able to go that side. There will be a space whereby there are already members that will indicate or give direction where other vehicles must park. Behind the hearse, we are going to allow one family vehicle, immediate family vehicle, and then we allow the vehicle of our deputy president. And then from there, it will be our police mourners. Behind the police mourners, it will be the vehicles of the family. The reason for that is not like we are closing the family, other vehicles of the family not to be part. It's because of outside there, we are going to give the command. But if the procession is too long, they won't be able to hear those commands. At the graveside as well, we will allow the hearse, the family vehicle, the car of the deputy president to go inside. That is for us to, it is because there's no space to go inside and then we form up. Then after that, we will allow other vehicles to come in until at the end of the way of the ceremonial part. I think from my side, that's all from my side. Thank you very much. just one thing that I forgot. I will now call the bearers to come and then get our deceased.
General, Luna Camarade Solvera. General, guys.
A very good afternoon to you once again with the SABC's continuing coverage of the funeral service of the late Mosiuoa Lekota. What you're looking at now, we are at the point in the program where he will be taken at last to his final resting place. He'll be buried at a cemetery in
before the cortege departs for Parbank Cemetery, and those who will be remaining, we request them to stay behind and they will be guided. Thank you.